Welcome to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger. At Press Coverage, I want to bring you the sharpest guests, and I want to help you find the edges to help you win in fantasy. And I'm excited today to be joined by Adam Levitan, who was actually one of my first guests right here on Press Coverage when I launched this podcast. I had Adam Levitan and I had Sigmund Bloom, like two OGs. You're a lot younger than Sig, but you guys have been doing it for a long time, crushing it in the game. Adam, I'm sure everybody follows you. You're putting out tremendous work at Establish the Run. You guys had some really cool stuff come out after the NFL draft, and you're starting up like a really cool best ball subscription. I know a lot of people have, looked at you guys lately with some of the great success you've had with DFS content, but this best ball stuff is really cool as well.
Yeah, we're trying to put a bigger focus on best ball and then also bigger focus on in-season, regular season long this year, in addition to obviously, we think we have the best DFS stuff. So yeah, best ball has gotten very popular. I understand why. It's like my favorite part of fantasy is the draft. I don't love waivers and trades and setting lineups and everything. And so it's just such a great format. And so, yeah, we're all in covering it this year. You can head to establishtherun.com to see more details.
Yeah. And what contests are you covering? Because I know like here we are, talking about FFPC, we're talking about Underdog. What sort of contests are you guys focusing on with this best ball coverage?
Yeah, we have content on every site that's offering anything meaningful. So right now we have Underdog, DraftKings, FFPC, Drafters, and Best Ball 10s for rankings and context around those rankings.
Awesome. Definitely looking forward to that. And a big shout out to you guys for getting John Daboll. He's also been on Press Coverage a couple times and First Class Fantasy as well into the fold. Really, really nice addition for you guys to add Daboll. I'm sure he's going to be cooking all summer long. But we got to start talking about it because we just had the NFL draft, where we now know the landing spots. We're all like sort of coming to terms with what these guys are and their particular roles. But we got to kind of look at this rookie class from a big picture. And you guys are, really going to get your redraft content going. And I'm sure you're thinking a lot about this. But if you could know the final stats of any of these rookies, who would it be?
Yeah, my answer, I guess, is the chalk answer, but it would be Xavier Worthy because, I'm still interested in how long Rashee Rice is going to be suspended for. I'm still interested in Marquise Brown at cost. I'm also, Travis Kelce's been going fourth, sometimes fifth round. If we knew that Worthy wasn't going to do anything, maybe I could take Travis Kelce higher than that. If I knew Worthy was going to go for 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns, well, that's not great, I don't think, for Marquise Brown, but certainly very good for Patrick Mahomes. So, the range of outcomes for Xavier Worthy, I know some people as a floor case could be like Mecole Hardman and, in a best case scenario, Tyreek Hill or Deshaun Jackson. Anything along those lines wouldn't shock me where I think he's going to play early. But I thought Rashee Rice was awesome last year. They had no one else. And the Chiefs still didn't play him that early. It wasn't until the second half that he really started to break out in terms of usage and production. So, yeah, I think Worthy would be the one that I'd want to know right now.
Yeah, I love that answer because it sort of opens things up for so many other guys in terms of should we be targeting them. Yeah, we're big on Worthy. I saw, you looked at him as a guy. We're going to talk about some of Adam's favorite rookie landing spots, but I'm with you. I'm very excited about him there. The first time the Chiefs have drafted a wide receiver in the first round since 2011, and it's the fastest player ever at the combine. I mean, how cool is that? How about a veteran? Is there a veteran, like when you're doing your own personal ranks or looking at the current values, is there a veteran where you're like, man, I really wish I knew this guy's final stats?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about the Falcons. And so no team is going to have a bigger change in offensive philosophy. You could argue no team has a better upgrade in quarterback play than the Falcons will this year. Reports are already out that Kirk Cousins is going to be healthy. And so I'd love to know what his final stats are. Does he sustain health for the whole year? Should I be using a first round pick on Bijan Robinson? Should I be using a 1-2 turn pick on Drake London? I'm still intrigued by Kyle Pitts. I don't think Darnell Mooney is dead. And so if I knew that Kirk Cousins was going to throw for 4,500 yards and 35 touchdowns like he did so often in Minnesota, it would be a smash, right? Like I would take Bijan and Drake London 1-2. And like, I'm just really tempted to take all these guys anyways. Bijan, London, Pitts. So I'm trying to save myself from myself by knowing what Kirk Cousins' final stat line would be.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's a really, really tilting one. And Bijan, it's like Bijan feels like this could be like 22 points per game. Like this could be the guy that just kind of breaks everything. And I'm glad you brought up London because we're seeing London steam up in every single format. If you want him on underdog, you've got to use a early second round pick. If you want him in a dynasty, I'm in an FFPC startup where Drake London went off the board like close, like right around Puka Nacua, right around Garrett Wilson, like steamed way, way up ahead of Chris Olave. Where are you at kind of on Drake London? How do you see this thing sort of playing out for him?
I mean, I think if Drake London was drafted by the Vikings or the Rams or something instead of Justin Jefferson going to the Vikings or Puka Nacua going to the Rams, that people would be talking about Drake London as one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL. And so now he gets this massive scheme change. He's still playing in a dome. He finally gets the quarterback upgrade. I think their pass rate will be really high. So, yeah, I'm excited for Drake London. I'd be lying if I said I was like super comfortable where he's going, which has been 13th overall, 14th overall, something like that. It's a little uncomfortable, but the second round of fantasy right now is so weak, I think, that's just kind of the way it is, like Drake London versus Chris Olave. I think I prefer Drake London right now. And then you get into like Drake London versus Jalen Waddle. I definitely prefer Drake London there. So, once you start actually doing drafts, I think it's going to be hard for people to get away from early second round Drake London. And I think it's right.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he's also just so young. I mean, we're talking about some of these rookies, wide receivers in this class, like Xavier Legette and Ricky Pearsall. These guys are older than Drake London, and he's got 2 full years under his belt. So this really feels like the year for him. You brought up Atlanta, and that's sort of an offense that people are circling as one that could take big steps forward. And I think it's this time of year we get really into the players, but if we can identify those particular offenses that can sort of raise everybody's ceilings, then we can just hit on a ton of guys at ADP. Think about last year with like Detroit, where Gibbs hit, David Montgomery hit, Sam Laporta, tight end 1, Jared Goff hit, certainly Amon-Ra St. Brown hit. Then 2 years ago, Miami with Waddle and Hill, Jacksonville, a ton of guys hit 2 seasons ago. If we can just target a couple of these ascending offenses, it just makes things a little bit easier in our decisions on the clock. What are a couple offenses that you think could take big steps forward this year?
Yeah, Falcons the obvious one. I'll go to some more off the board ones. I think Colts have a chance to smash me. If you go back and look at those games where Anthony Richardson played, it was going to be an absolute bonanza for him and this offense. And even after he went down, they continued to play very fast. They continued to be throw centric. I have so much respect for Shane Steichen. I love that they got A.D. Mitchell. So yeah, and they bring Pittman back into the fold. So certainly think the Colts can take big step forward. Bears also, I mean, should be obvious, but quarterback play, I have a ton of respect for Caleb Williams. And then you get him, Keenan, Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. Bears offense is going to be good. I have a bunch of bets already on Matt Eberflus, coach of the year, just based on them being good. Jets, I've been betting a bunch of Jets stuff just to be better than people think. Plus 290. I think I have to win AFC East and some long shot odds to win the AFC, odds to win Super Bowl stuff. Corley in the Randall Cobb role and Garrett Wilson in the Devontae Adams role with Breece Hall. They could really smash. And then the one I don't feel great about, but deep, like backdoor stacks in best ball, the Broncos, if Bo Nix is a hit in this Sean Payton offense, you get Cortland Sutton really cheap. You get Marvin Mims really, really cheap. I just took Javonte Williams in a draft last night. I think it was like the 10th round or something. I mean, these guys are like free. No one thinks the Broncos are going to be able to do anything. So the bar for Bo Nix is really low. If Bo Nix can be league average, you can still profit on ADP there.
Yeah, I like some of those answers. Those are the Colts. I feel like there's a lot of really smart people betting on the Colts taking this major ascent. And Anthony Richardson just seems like sort of cheat code whenever you can get him in any format right now. I'm totally with you on that one. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to hear Adam's favorite rookie landing spots and also a couple of veterans that really, really improved their outlooks after the NFL draft. Stick with us here at Press Coverage.
Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February and Dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it!
Welcome back to Press Coverage. Theo Gremminger with Adam Levitan of Establish the Run. Adam, let's start with these rookies. It was an incredible draft for fantasy where we set the record for – we tied the record for the number of wide receivers drafted in the first round. We also have the 6 quarterbacks. I mean, just incredible. Also Brock Bowers. And the first 14 selections were on the offensive side of the ball. It was like a really incredible one, and certainly a tilting one for fantasy managers. Let's start out. You dropped a podcast. If you want to go a little bit deeper on some of Adam's favorite landing spots, you go up to like 20, and then you gave a couple of bonus ones with Evan Silva as well as Field Yates. Really good one. Definitely check that one out. But we're going to keep it a little tighter. One wide receiver that you've talked about, certainly on Twitter and then also on the podcast, is Roman Wilson. Why don't you talk about his situation and sort of the outlook that he has this year in Pittsburgh?
Yeah. I mean, there's just such little competition, and Roman Wilson ran so fast at the combine. The Steelers are going to need that explosive ability. I mean, I'm not sure George Pickens is a guy that you want to be throwing the ball 12 times a game to 11 times a game to. Maybe they don't have a choice, but that never struck me as George Pickens' game. And so I do think they'll be very run heavy. I mean, they invested a bunch on interior offensive line. I did think Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris were 2 winners coming out of the draft and coming out of free agency. But Roman Wilson's going to have a very clear path to playing time if he's good. I mean, he has like no one, like Van Jefferson, and maybe they'll add someone at some point. But even if they don't throw a lot, I do think Roman Wilson can earn 15 to 20% of the targets. And for a guy going so late, and a guy who theoretically at least can do things after he catches the football out of the slot and underneath, I thought it was interesting. That was our number 13 best landing spot in this class, Roman Wilson to the Steelers.
Yeah, I like that one. It's interesting. I think you bring up Pickens sort of being like a capped target type guy. I don't think it's just because it's year 3, he's going to take some huge explosion. But I think Wilson's interesting. I think also Jaylen Warren is potentially the guy that takes a little bit of a step forward. But that's interesting. If there's another 3rd round wide receiver, and last year we actually had, after a number of years of like waiting on 3rd round wide receivers to hit for us, Nico Collins breaks out late. And then we, of course, had Tank Dell and Josh Downs. And you brought up Roman Wilson, but another wide receiver that's certainly steamed up in FFPC Dynasty leagues is Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton falls to round 3. There was some rumors about off-the-field stuff, and he's going to fall. Still manages to go on day 2, and then lands on an offense where he's got a legitimate pathway to being the wide receiver 2 in 2025, assuming T. Higgins moves on. Talk to us about Jermaine Burton and sort of the appeal about him.
Yeah, I mean, from a talent perspective, I think everybody would agree, or most would agree, that Jermaine Burton would have gone earlier just based on raw talent. I mean, he was an Alabama recruit. Jermaine Burton can be the number 3 wide receiver for the Bengals as soon as year 1. And I think, he's competing against like Andre Yosevich or et cetera. I think maybe something lost in the Bengals stuff is when your running backs are Zach Moss and your running backs are Chase Brown and your quarterback is Joe Burrow and you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, like you could have a really, really high throw rate. Like they could be throwing a ton. And so 3rd wide receiver can pop up for big games in that spot. So Burton has a path to that. And then from the dynasty perspective, it's obviously an awesome spot. He's attached to Joe Burrow, and T. Higgins is like 95% to be gone after the 2024 season. There's just no way they can pay Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and pay T. Higgins, who is going to get 50, 60 million guaranteed in free agency, assuming that he gets there. So From both a redraft, from redraft, yeah, it's not the nuts, but from Dynasty, just an awesome spot for Jermaine Burton.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it'll be interesting to see how they use those wide receivers this year, especially when they go to 3 wide, because like Tyler Boyd was sort of his own thing, and Burton doesn't really project to be a Tyler Boyd. So you wonder if they're going to be moving Jamar Chase around a little bit more. I mean, for me, it's like having Yoshibus and Jermaine Burton in the wide receiver 3 role. Maybe I think this could be Jamar Chase's like true wide receiver 1 year. He could put up like CeeDee Lamb numbers from last year. So a lot to kind of unpack with that Bengals offense. Let's talk about Arizona, because we love Trey Benson at Player Profiler, and you had him pretty high up in your landing spots. I think that there's been a little bit of a discount because of the fact that James Conner is still there despite his age. But Benson, talk about a 4.39 40, a lot to like about him in this offense.
A lot of the tape bros had Trey Benson as the number 1 running back in their class, in this class. And, from a metrics perspective, he looks really good too, size, speed. Obviously, I don't know why people don't like this landing spot. I think it is an awesome landing spot for Trey Benson. I actually had this higher on my list until we kind of had it talked with the team about it, and we moved him down below Jonathan Brooks. But James Conner is 29. James Conner has been on the injury report constantly for the last, 3 or 4 seasons. This offense is ascending in a big way. Like, they have Kyler, they have Marvin Harrison, they have Trey McBride. Like, this offense is going to be good in the dome. And so I think Trey Benson can earn 30, 35% of the touches right away. James Conner is going to miss games this year. And then long term, Trey Benson is a talented guy in what I think is going to be a really good offense. So I thought it was really, really strong landing spot for Trey Benson. I mean, with Jonathan Brooks, by the time his ACL is fully healed, Trey Benson could have already supplanted James Conner. I'm not saying it's the likeliest outcome, but it's at least possible that by October or November that Trey Benson has worked his way into a really sizable role for Arizona, even if James Conner is healthy.
Yeah, and you think about some of the guys that have been playing behind Conner. I mean, Amari DiMercato, Michael Carter. It's sort of been a lot of these kind of jag players and journeymen. Benson, I think, is going to put real pressure on him for touches. And like you said, I mean, this is an offense that's really ascending. I think a year from now, when we're looking at redraft rankings heading into 2025, like Trey Benson could be a guy we're drafting in like the 2nd round as the starting. So he's definitely really exciting. But talk about Jonathan Brooks, because Carolina is a team that got a lot of criticism from taking a running back this early when they have so many holes to fill. I took the counter approach that I think it takes a little bit of pressure off of maybe Bryce Young, and Brooks projects to sort of be an offensive focal point. Now attached to Dave Canales, a guy who had so much success in a high volume attack with Rachaad White last year. Your thoughts on Jonathan Brooks?
I struggle with this one. I mean, they not only did they take Jonathan Brooks in the 2nd round, they traded up for him, and I think that says something. I just thought they could have gotten by with Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. Like, is the gap really, Jonathan Brooks off an ACL tear down to Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, is the gap really that wide? But now that they made this commitment and they've been adamant that they want to run the ball a ton, I just think they're going to be losing a lot. And so it's hard to run the ball a ton when you're losing. If Bryce Young does not get better, if Bryce Young does not get somewhere near league average play, this is not a good landing spot. It's just not, like, running backs are so tied to team success, to how many touchdowns your team is going to score. And if Bryce Young continues to suck, it's going to be a real problem for this landing spot. So that was my biggest thing, why I actually thought we could have Benson's landing spot ahead of Jonathan Brooks. From an opportunity perspective, I assume if the ACL is healthy, they're going to try to ride him. But, we'll see what happens with Miles Sanders, and we'll see what happens with Chuba Hubbard. I know they also signed Rashad Penny. So it's not the best, I don't think, for Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we can imagine the steam if he just would have gone where he was supposed to go with the books, having him go to Dallas. I mean, we'd be talking about, it would be a whole nother conversation. Dynasty drafts would look completely different this week if he was a Cowboy, but whatever. We'll try to dissect that Cowboys backfield another time. Rome Odunze gets top 10 draft capital, goes number 9 overall, lands with what we both would agree is a great quarterback prospect in Caleb Williams, but there is target competition. is this a CeeDee Lamb rookie season part 2, where he sort of takes huge strides in the second half of the year? Or is this a sort of wait and see? We're going to really see Odunze take off in 2025.
Yeah, it's tough from a redraft perspective. I think Dynasty, Rome is a smash. Redraft, it's harder. And so that's why we had his landing spot a little bit lower here for redraft. Keenan Allen is going to earn a ton of targets. DJ Moore is going to earn a ton of targets. They have 2 tight ends who can play in the pass game, Gerald Everett and Cole Kmet. And so Rome is going to play like this boundary role. Sometimes you get these guys have huge years early out of the slot in like a big slot role. Rome is going to be a boundary wide receiver for the Bears. And so he's going to have to be earning targets at the expense of DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet. I don't know that's going to happen right out of the gate. So, in best ball where you are rewarded and you can get by early in the year, where you're rewarded for real late season production in an outsized way. We still have Rome as like a 7th round pick, I think, in best ball. I think when it comes to redraft, like drafting with my buddies from home, people are going to give up on Rome possibly before he actually hits. So I think he'll go much later in redraft type settings, and he probably should.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one to try to gauge because the talent's there, the profile's there, but there's target competition everywhere. Like, everybody talks about the DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. You bring up Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet was like tight end 8 last year. And then you add in DeAndre Swift, who's a back that's commanded targets for a great portion of his career. So it's definitely an interesting one, but long-term, we got to love it. It's Odunze attached to Caleb Williams. I mean, this could be an incredible correlation play for years to come. And Keenan Allen seems like a 1-year thing, just based on his age and the fact that they drafted Odunze. But let's go with your numbers. I think I messed up the numbers, but the player in front of Odunze was Brian Thomas.
Yeah.
Brian Thomas is exciting.
Yeah, Brian Thomas, we have 8. Obviously had this insane touchdown rate at Texas last year.
LSU
last year. You get rid of Calvin Ridley, you bring in Gabe Davis, you get rid of Zay Jones, you bring in Brian Thomas. I think it's just a question, do you think Brian Thomas can play? Brian Thomas has a bunch of haters out there. I'm no Dynasty bro, but I know he has a bunch of haters out there based on lack of production. I don't know that I buy that as much. I think he will immediately outplay Gabe Davis in this role, and like where Evan Ingram, where Travis Etienne, where Christian Kirk all win is like in the middle of the field. And so just having Brian Thomas out there, he could see a lot of clean coverages out wide. So I like this spot for Brian Thomas. To me, it's just a question of, do you think he's actually good or not? And how soon will he realize kind of this size, speed freak thing that he has going on?
Yeah, I like it. And wide receiver wise, you brought up Gabe Davis, who's never a guy that's been like heavily targeted. And Christian Kirk sort of topped out with like 130 targets. Evan Ingram, incredible amount of targets last year, and that shouldn't change. But in terms of like wide receivers, I think Brian Thomas landing spot's really good. Trevor Lawrence, for whatever it is, he's still like a plus quarterback situation for him as well. So that's a fun one. But now everybody's favorite rookie wide receiver lands right ahead of Brian Thomas, and that's Ladd McConkey. Talk about your thoughts on him. This is a guy steaming up. People are going nuts to get him in their rookie drafts.
I mean, from a landing spot perspective, smash, right? I mean, 7 of those, and I know that they are going to be run heavy. I know they're going to try to. Their current running backs are Gus Edwards, who is 29 and has never been exciting, and we're talking about a 6th or 7th round pick in Vidal, and we're talking about a guy who I'm not even sure is going to make the team due to health in J.K. Dobbins. So, are you actually going to be able to run the ball at the rate that they want to? I don't know. You also have a very, very good young quarterback with no one to throw to except Ladd McConkey. I mean, they even let Gerald Everett go. I mean, they were just like, forget it. Mike Williams gone. Keenan Allen's gone. Gerald Everett's gone. Austin Eckler's gone. Everybody's gone. And so Ladd McConkey's sample size in college scares me. How often he was hurt in college scares me. But from a landing spot perspective, it's hard to find a better one for Ladd McConkey than the Chargers here. So again, similar to BTJ, and even more so for McConkey, if he's good, he's going to smash. Like they just don't have a choice, and Justin Herbert's going to be fine. So yeah, couldn't imagine a better landing spot for McConkey.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like the year one pathway is pretty clear. It's about as many targets as he can handle. I think the only thing with McConkey versus some of these guys like, Brian Thomas, when we're talking about rookie drafts, is Lad McConkey a guy who sort of projects to be a wide receiver one in an NFL offense, or is this a guy that's like sort of a fake wide receiver one, a circumstantial wide receiver one, and then they eventually draft an alpha, and he settles into like the slot role or wide receiver two, which is fine. But I think Lad this year, I mean, he's the guy you want to get a lot of. Just quickly, your thoughts on Herbert's value in underdog drafts. We're seeing him at like quarterback 14, quarterback 15. Do you think that it's sort of like an over adjustment by the market based on his talent? I know this offense is going to run a lot, but not to get too sidetracked, but it seems a little odd to be drafting a guy like Justin Herbert this late.
I know. It's hard. The problem is, like, not only do we have this situation with the throw rate, right? Like, the throw rate is going to be a problem. We also have questions about all of his pass catchers. Like, we haven't seen him without Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And when you're throwing at Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer and Lad McConkey, I don't know what the efficiency is going to be like. I still think Justin Herbert's good. I still think the efficiency will be there, but it's a scary click right now. I mean, like you said, he goes super late. I believe his ADP is actually QB 17 right now.
Oh man,
123rd overall. He's been going. So yeah, I think weapons matter. I really do. And so if Lad McConkey ends up not being that good or he's hurt, and if you think Quentin Johnston can't play and Josh Palmer is average or sub-average, that's a big problem for Justin Herbert on top of the throw rate, So I understand why he's going QB 17. It does feel late though.
Yeah, and he's also a guy that's been targeting his running backs out of the backfield forever. And now they have a bunch of guys who don't project as pass catchers. It's super weird.
Yeah.
And you've also got the hey, Greg Roman offenses were always pretty productive at the tight end position, but they go out and get like Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst. So there's nothing there. It's really nothing besides Lad McConkey. So go ahead, Lad, go have a 150 target season, and let's cash some of those Herbert tickets. Mm-hmm. But one quarterback who's not going to have to worry about weapons is JJ McCarthy. Lands in like the nut spot for him. Probably the best ideal outcome for JJ McCarthy, where he gets Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, a plus offensive line, and pretty smart coaches on the offensive side of the ball who've been able to succeed with different quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering which quarterback was going to end up with the Vikings because we knew that we were going to be super high on them. And we had these outrageous projections last year on Nick Mullins when he started. We had outrageous projections on Josh Dobbs when he started. And these guys, they failed at times, but they also had huge fantasy games at times. It's just really hard to fail when you have the weapons that the Vikings have, you play in the dome, and you have this throw rate and you have this scheme. It's just really hard to fail. And so JJ McCarthy would have to be really bad to not be a fantasy viable quarterback. Will he beat out Sam Darnold right out of the gate? That's maybe the one question why he wasn't higher on our list. We have number 6 in terms of best rookie landing spots. Can he beat out Sam Darnold out of the gate? I think so. I think he will, but I don't know for sure. So if he does, I mean, he's going to be an awesome pick in redraft. I mean, nobody's going to want to take him in home league type stuff, and he's going to be a great pick.
Yeah, and just to get sidetracked, not to get on a Drake May tangent, but do you see that playing out where it's going to be Brissett starting game 1 for New England? The betting markets are basically telling us that. It just seems a little bit odd to me that you turn down that sort of a trade offer from the Giants where you could have got 6 overall and next year's first, and then you draft him and then you go with Jacoby Brissett. Just seems a little odd. Do you think that this is sort of going to correct itself over the summer, or are you going with Vegas on this one?
I mean, historically, right? Like if you get drafted in the top 10 and you're a quarterback, or especially the top 5, you start week 1. That's been like the major trend over the last 5 years or so. Field Yates came on our show and was adamant, and he's like the Patriots guy. He knows everybody at the Patriots. He was adamant that Jacoby Brissett is very live, and his bet would be on Brissett to start the first few games, month, whatever it is. So, this is an information-based thing, I think, more than how you view the player type thing. I know a lot of the Dynasty bros think that Drake May is more developmental project. I personally think the best way to learn to play the quarterback position in the NFL is to actually go out there and play it. So I would play Drake May in week 1 if I was the Patriots. But, we have such good information on the Patriots from Mike Reese and Field that I think we'll know that. And right now their lean seems to be that Jacoby Brissett will be the week 1 starter.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one to follow. One player who we're both really excited about and both like the landing spot, I think, more than others is Malik Nabers. We talked a little bit about it in the pre-show, and I kind of gave you props for this one. Like, people are looking at this from a glass half empty perspective with the quality of the quarterback play, where he could have gone potentially to the Chargers or the Cardinals. But Malik Nabers lands in an offense where there's no one, and this is a chance to lead all rookies in targets for a player this explosive. And he's also sort of the offensive focal point with Devin Singletary now leading the backfield. So I love this landing spot. Maybe your thoughts on Nabers. Does he save Brian Daboll?
I mean, I think Daboll sees him as Steph Diggs,
Yeah.
and there's been comps there, and you saw how many targets Steph Diggs can earn in a Daboll offense. It can be absolutely absurd. Not only do the Giants lack weaponry at wide receiver, not only do they lose Saquon, but now it sounds like Darren Waller's retiring also, So, I mean, God, 9-10 targets a game from Malik Nabers is not out of the question. And if he is this insane prospect, this generational prospect that a lot of people seem to think he is, I mean, there were plenty of guys that I think Daniel Jeremiah, a couple other guys had Nabers ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. in their big board. If he's that good, if he's generational wide receiver prospect, Daniel Jones and Drew Lock are fine for him to succeed, like totally fine. And I'm not ready to say Daniel Jones is like total dust yet. We're not that far removed from Daniel Jones being like, the 8th quarterback in 8 points per game or winning a playoff game. I'm not ready to completely kill Daniel Jones yet. Malik Nabers will be by far the best pass catcher he's ever played with.
Yeah, and the last time we saw them draft an LSU wide receiver in the first round, it worked out pretty well. Yeah. That was Odell going for like 24 points a game. So if he gets 80% of Odell rookie season, I mean, you're talking about a huge win rate where you're getting him in best ball drafts right now. And I expect redraft, he's also going to be kind of a funny player to gauge for redrafts because I think people are going to be scared off of the Giants offense a lot. But I agree with you. We saw Diggs get 160 targets his first year with Daboll. I mean, Nabers to the moon. But let's talk about Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, you talked about your Eberflus bets earlier in the show, how you expect the Chicago offense to take a step forward. You talked a little bit about it with Adunze, but simply Caleb Williams, unbelievable player. And the bar is low for him to start setting records in Chicago.
Normally a number 1 pick goes to a team that was so bad, has no talent. They're just, it's really gonna be really hard for the quarterback to succeed. Caleb Williams is going to a team that has an awesome 3 wide receiver set, 2 good pass catching tight ends, a pass catching running back in DeAndre Swift. I mean, for a number 1 overall pick, you're not going to get a better situation than this. Now, Bears play outside in December. It's not ideal, but from a landing spot perspective for a number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams' profile, it's hard to think that he would be dropped into a better offense in terms of weapons. I know people are worried about the offensive line. I don't think it's as bad as people think. It's probably not good, but I think somewhere around like Brandon Thorne will have his rankings out later. Would not surprise me if they came in 20th or like 22nd in the league. It's not like the Titans last year who had just a completely anemic offensive line. I don't think the Bears offensive line is quite that bad. So landing spot is awesome for Caleb.
Yeah, I think that it was sort of a testament that they feel comfortable with the offensive line based on the Adunze pick, because there was a bunch of players there that they could have selected that would have just like shored up everything. So I think like they were a little bit younger last year. I think that they expect their offensive line to take a step forward. So I think that's a really good point. Keon Coleman. Let's talk Keon Coleman. We had Mike Shope on our NFL draft coverage. There was a lot of people in Buffalo that are really, really excited about this pick. And you seem to be excited as well.
I mean, from a landing spot perspective, Keon Coleman is a smash. Gabe Davis is gone. Steph Diggs is gone. You're attached to Josh Allen, and you're their first pick. Now, they traded back twice and got Keon Coleman. I know Keon Coleman is not like the type of profile that I normally like in terms of everything's contested catches. He's not that fast. I know that there's that out there on the field. He's way faster. But if Keon Coleman is good, if he's a real solid NFL player, this is an awesome landing spot. And I like some of their guys that the Bills have, Shakir and Kincaid and Curtis Samuel, I think is interesting. But if Keon Coleman is actually an alpha, this is an incredible, incredible landing spot here with Josh Allen.
And we saw the front office, any chance they get, they're talking about Keon Coleman is going to play the X. They're just going to play him outside. Do you think that's just a little like gamesmanship and they could potentially move him around? I know I heard, Matt Harmon saying, that he sees him as sort of a guy who could end up being a big slot and maybe succeed there and be moved around a lot. It just seemed a little odd to kind of say, this is what we're doing with the guy. Do you buy into it? Is it sort of keeping things simple for a rookie, or is it, once the whistle blows and we start up the actual NFL season, we're gonna move this guy around and try to get him the ball?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of teams do this, where in year one you're gonna learn one position, you're gonna learn X, or you're gonna learn Z, or whatever. Like a lot of teams do that with rookies. It's certainly possible. And also, Kincaid and Shakir and Curtis Samuel and these guys, they like to work over the middle of the field too. I'm not sure that you're splitting these guys out too wide also. So yeah, I didn't see that quote, but that would make sense to me if they just try to ask him to earn one spot.
Yeah, it would be one thing to follow, because certainly at Florida State they used him in different ways, and they actually used him in the return game, which shout out to Evan Silva, always talks about when these guys are used as return men, it's a good sign for future fantasy success. So
Sure.
Definitely, especially for a guy Keon Coleman's size, to be used in the return game. And then you already talked about it a little earlier, but your number one favorite landing spot.
Number one. Well, we didn't do number two, is Marvin Harrison to the Cardinals.
Skipped it. So let's go MHJ.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, you could argue that MHJ should have number one landing spot. I think Field made that point on our show, attached to Kyler, obviously, and they have like such a need at the wide receiver position. I'm not really a Michael Wilson guy. I know Michael Wilson still has fans out there. I don't know if the Cardinals are Michael Wilson guys, considering they just signed Zay Jones. They still have Greg Dortch, but yeah, Kyler, Dome, big need, awesome landing spot, obviously, for Marvin Harrison. I think we knew that kind of coming into the draft.
Wide receiver 9 right now, an underdog, and I still think he's going to smash at that position. Where do you feel comfortable? Because that there's going to be, all it takes is a little bit of a little bit of camp buzz, and all of a sudden wide receiver 9 is like wide receiver 7.
Yeah.
Where would you be your comfort level drafting him right now?
We have him behind Puka. We have him behind Drake London. We have him behind AJ Brown. We have him behind Garrett Wilson. And so we're like a little bit behind the market. We have him as wide receiver 10. He's going off as wide receiver 9. I think, we try not to completely go nuts on rookies. This time of year, May, everybody is excited about the rookies. They're excited about wide receivers. They're taking crazy, like Jalen Wright, the Dolphins running back, is going in like the 130s and 140s. Barring an injury, he might be their running back 3 all year, and like that's a pretty big price to pay for a third running back. But people are just so excited about the rookies. So we're trying not to get out over our skis on all the rookies. So yes, I feel better about AJ Brown. Yes, I feel better about Garrett Wilson. But Marvin Harrison versus like Chris Olave, or Marvin Harrison versus Devontae Adams, I'm fine with Marvin Harrison over those guys.
Yeah, he's definitely one that I'm going to try to get a lot of. Jalen Wright, though, glad you brought him up. This is like the most steam I've ever seen for a 4th round running back, who has players around him. In FFPC single QB rookie drafts now, we're starting to see Jalen Wright creep up to like the 111, the 112, early second. It's crazy. The only other player drafted in that range to sort of steam up to this level was Michael Carter, who had literally nothing around him besides like Tevin Coleman. So yeah, the Mike McDaniel factor is absolutely real.
Well, I also think that people just assume two things. They assume Raheem Mostert at his age is going to regress, and they assume Devon Achane is going to get hurt, and those are like two assumptions everyone's making like they're locks. That's probably like the base case, but doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an interesting one. I wanted a little more Jalen Wright than I ended up getting, just because of the price. But I did add him on some of my Devon A-Chain teams just because, A-Chain to the moon, but I'm covering with that contingent play. Let's talk about just a few veteran winners. And I'll go a shout out to Jack Miller, who does great work for you. I've podcasted with Jack before. Really sharp guy. We'll go off of his list. A couple of guys in his top 10 that weren't in the top 5. Kyler Murray. This is a sort of an underrated one where what a difference a year makes for Kyler Murray in sort of like his outlook in fantasy. We thought maybe he would be replaced by a Drake May or a Caleb Williams with all that draft capital. Instead, not only is he solidified as a starter, they add Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I mean, and another year removed from the knee tear, and Cliff Kingsbury, the donkey, is gone, and you get Marvin Harrison, and you have a huge hit in Trey McBride. And you just added Zay Jones for depth with Dortch, who I think can play, and Michael Wilson, who might still be able to play. I'm not sure, but might still be able to play. And so, yeah, I don't think Kyler is going to run at Lamar levels or Josh Allen levels, but Kyler giving you 40 yards a game rushing is very much in the range. And so, yeah, I like the way it's gone for Kyler. He's going pretty high. Let me check. Yeah, we have him 81st overall. That's about where he's going right now as the QB9. So certainly no discounts on Kyler this year, but it's certainly a winner for me from the draft for sure.
Yeah, and interesting because he's QB8 in Underdog Best Ball Mania right now. But again, you get him like 25 picks after a guy like Anthony Richardson. You get him, even further when you start looking at guys like CJ Stroud. So in terms of being able to stack and also, the potential that offense being a big breakout, I love Kyler as well there. Devin Singletary was definitely talked about. Jack had some good points on him. Anything to add on Devin Singletary?
God, I've never really been a big Devin Singletary guy. I did think that he played well.
Are there Devin Singletary guys out there?
That's a good question. You let go of Saquon and you bring in Devin Singletary in free agency on a relatively cheap deal. The assumption is that you're going to add running backs. I like that the Giants didn't. They did take Tyrone Tracy, but that wasn't until the 5th round. And so we have pretty big workload projection on Singletary. Given his history, we don't have a great efficiency, but we are above market on him right now just based on workload. I believe we have him around 100th, 101st overall, and he's going 114th or so. And so at the running back position, we know what correlates to fantasy points. It's just touches. And so if you start projecting Devin Singletary for a decent amount of touches, you're going to be a bit over market on him right now.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one. Another one that you've talked about and also was in the article was Jameson Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Who avoids, that was sort of a wild card pick at the end of the first round. There were people sort of projecting Detroit to consider a wide receiver there, maybe a Xavier Legette, maybe a Purcell would have gone there. Instead, they don't draft a wide receiver at all throughout the course of the NFL draft. Talk about Jameson Williams, year 3 breakout.
I don't think that they could have passed on cornerback, right? Like they needed cornerbacks so badly, did the Lions. So I like what they did. There was like a turning point somewhere where they kind of turned the corner on Jameson Williams and started being like, we love this guy. He's blocking. He's working so hard in practice. Whereas before it was like, oh, he's always hurt. He's got the hamstring. He was gambling. He was suspended. He was coming off the ACL at Alabama. Full off season with the team like fully behind him. Let Josh Reynolds go, who earned a bunch of targets for them last year. If he can't beat out Khalif Raymond as number 8 overall pick or whatever he was out of Alabama, like we have real problems. So I'm so excited about Jameson Williams. My biggest concern is volume because I do not think that he fits with Jared Goff. In other words, Jared Goff loves to throw short, loves to throw over the middle. That's why Laporta and Amon-Ra and Gibbs are such smashes. But they're going to give Jameson Williams 3 to 5 shots a game, and he gets those end arounds. I'm worried that he's going to get steamed like out of control for a guy who might not get more than 5 targets a game, though. So we're going to have to see what the market does on Jameson Williams.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. He seems very much like a summer steam guy, especially in wide receiver heavy formats. So it'll be interesting, but you definitely want to have a little bit of exposure to him based on like what could happen. You bring up the end arounds. Ben Johnson's a creative guy. I mean, they can figure out some ways to get him the ball, and the spike weeks are coming. Just him being on the field, he's going to have weeks that are going to help you, especially in best ball. But let's talk about the top 5 here. Jake Ferguson, interesting winner right there.
Yeah, I mean, Cowboys did not have any room to do anything in free agency, and they also haven't done anything at pass catcher. in the draft. So, I mean, and Michael Gallup is gone too. So Jake Ferguson, people think it was fluky. I don't think his year last year was that fluky. He is expensive this year, and the tight end landscape is rough. I mean, he's going 88th overall. Is Jake Ferguson? I think that's fine, but certainly, like not excited about clicking Jake Ferguson at 88th overall. But I think it's fine. And Cowboys did so little; it's like hard to see him not repeating last year.
Yeah, and he got a ton of red zone looks with Dak as well. So he actually left a little bit on the table. If he would have caught a few extra touchdowns there, I mean, he would have finished even higher.
Yeah. And when your running backs are Zeke and Rico Dowdle, like they're going to have a very high throw rate, very, very high.
Yeah, they're an analytical team now. So that's going to be CeeDee Lamb with 200 targets. And, there'll be some winners there. Talk about the Bengals backfield, because I think this is one where in best ball, it's very doable right now to take Zach Moss and Chase Brown.
Sure.
But when it comes down to redraft, people are going to usually have to make a choice because neither one's going to be cheap enough.
Yeah. I mean, Zach Moss was so good last year and Chase Brown is a 5th round pick, and so we have Zach Moss ahead. I like that they trusted Chase Brown down the stretch last year. Obviously, I like that Chase Brown can catch the football, but I actually think that they might trust Zach Moss more in pass protection. And so if that's the case, and they don't have Chase Brown out there in 2-minute, in 4-minute, and this team likes to be in, that was the P. Ryan role. And, I always loved playing P. Ryan, especially when Joe Mixon was out, because he already had that 2-minute and 4-minute role ahead of Joe Mixon. I think that's an important role for the Bengals, who like to be in that hurry up, that shotgun a bunch with Joe Burrow. So I'm a little worried that Chase Brown's being overdrafted right now based on just what's his role. If he's just going to be a breather back to Zach Moss and not play those clear pass downs, that would be a concern for me. So that's one I'm definitely watching closely for news in camp.
And then talk about Joe Mixon, because Joe Mixon ends up, you just talked about the Samaje Perine role. Let's talk about Mixon, because Mixon's now on Houston. This whole offense is steaming up, and Houston was a team that people thought maybe could add a running back that, could challenge Mixon a little bit. Again, comes through the draft unscathed.
I mean, word is out, I think, that this scheme does not fit Dameon Pierce. They do not think he fits this Bobby Slowick scheme. And so that you saw late last year, he didn't even play. Like, he barely played. It was crazy. He went from so productive as a rookie to just not playing behind Devin Singletary. So clearly they think Joe Mixon fits because they went out and gave him a bunch of money, 3-year, $27 million contract. I have no concern that Dameon Pierce is going to challenge Joe Mixon. I actually think they could end up trading Dameon Pierce if anyone wants him. The problem is you can't really get much for it, so you might as well just keep him. But yeah, Joe Mixon is going to be his job. Efficiency problems, but everybody's efficient when they have CJ Stroud. I mean, just go back and look at any CJ Stroud season. Like, it seems like everyone has their best season when CJ Stroud is out there. So I'm okay with Mixon. That's not really a range of the draft I like to take running back. He's going 55th overall. But in a vacuum, I do think Joe Mixon is going to have plenty of volume.
Well, one player going lower than Mixon is Zamir White. And Zamir White, again, Dylan Lobby was the only running back that the Raiders added in the course of the draft. Certainly very different than Zamir White. Are we going to see Zamir White in sort of a Josh Jacobs-like role? How enthusiastic are you about adding him right now?
That's what we saw late last year, right? I mean, Zamir White was touching the ball 20-plus times a game.
4 straight games, he gave you a running back 20 or better for 4 straight weeks.
Yeah. I think that the Raiders are higher on Zamir White than the rest of us are. Like, they actually think Zamir White can be the guy. And they said that. They told us that in the draft. Dylan Lobb is not going to be like between the tackles at all. If he wins a job, it will be in the pass catching role. He was an outrageous pass catcher, obviously, at New Hampshire. So I think tied to Zamir White is a projection that he's going to get 300 plus touches this year. He's currently going 80th overall. If he gets 300 plus touches, that's going to look really low, So I'm not opposed to going 0 RB and having Zamir White as my first running back. I think that's an interesting way to draft.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I think he'll rise up during the summer, especially in redraft. But right now, definitely in a great spot on Underdog. Let's talk about the number one player in Jack's article, though, Gus Edwards. And Gus Edwards, there's a Kamani Vidal hive out there, but you have to like Gus after the NFL draft. Could have had a Blake Corum type land on day 2. Instead, they wait until day 3, take Kamani Vidal. J.K. Dobbinson struggled to stand an NFL field. And Gus last year gave us 13 touchdowns. He could have an even bigger role this year.
I mean, and not only that, they also passed on wide receiver at 5 overall in favor of offensive line, right? And that can't hurt Gus Edwards either. That's probably good for Gus Edwards, make them even more run heavy and even more run heavy around the goal line. So I'm no Gus Edwards fan. In fantasy, when guys are super touchdown dependent, that's not really the way that I like to play fantasy. I like my guys to be explosive so that they can make big plays that can break a week, or guys that can catch a bunch of passes so that they don't get schemed out. So it's tough for me on Gus Edwards, but he was certainly a winner. And, Greg Roman clearly likes him. And it seems like this is their plan, to go with Gus Edwards as their main back.
It's not exciting, but it's going to be a lot of Gus Edwards next year. Adam, you were super generous with your time and your takes. Let everybody know what you have coming out at Establish the Run.
Yeah, we'll be covering best ball as hard as we can throughout the entire summer. Shift to more redraft stuff starting June and July, get people ready for their home leagues. And then obviously our main focus is DFS during the season. If people plan to play DFS, want to get into it, anything like that, it is my favorite form of fantasy by far. Head to establishthерun.com. Check it out. And if you're watching this on YouTube, all of our stuff is on our YouTube channel. Also, check that out.
Yeah, these guys do a great job with YouTube, great job with podcasts. Highly recommend Adam's work over there and the great team over at Establish the Run. Stick with us here at Press Coverage. We're doing a little bit more of this rookie content, a little more Dynasty, but then we're dropping right into redraft. It's going to come heavy. We're going to be doing some live drafts here. We're going to be talking to a lot of sharp people like Adam, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.